Welcome back, all my 40K fanatics out there. I'm DJ here with Tim's Nation, bringing you another Grey Knights faction-focused video. So my last Grey Knights video where I talked about my GT list and just my thoughts and how I was playing it and how I looked at it, you guys seem to enjoy that. So I thought I would go and do a more in-depth breakdown talking about secondaries, the deployment, and some CP management in there as well. And just, again, like I said, I am no expert on Grey Knights, but I want to get the conversation started. I enjoy the combat comments. I enjoy the feedback on it. And Grey Knight community, man, it's one of the best communities to be a part of, guys. You guys are awesome out there. And speaking of communities, thank you guys so much. We just cleared 1,000 subscribers. And I got to say it, what a cool thing to have happen on your birthday, nonetheless. So that was a really cool birthday gift of just poof. 1,000 subscribers, big milestone for the channel. Thank you guys out there for all the support. Stay tuned after the video for more of that, where I want to thank you guys even more for everything like that. But let's get right over into talking about Grey Knights. Guys, subscribe to the channel already, please, if you haven't, and turn on the bell for notification, get notified on all the content we bring here on the channel. So, Grey Knights. And talking about the missions, we're going to need to talk about the cards. So, before I get over into that, something a couple of people have asked me, where I got the sleeves for my cards. So, one, why I sleeve these, because people say they're not like rare collectibles, why you're trying to keep them safe. Because people spill drinks on the table. And if someone spills a drink on the table and your outside of the card gets wet, yes, there's still an opening at the top, but the outside of the card gets wet. At worst, you have to replace that one sleeve. Otherwise, yes, there are apps out there that randomly generate it, but if you get one of these cards destroyed, most situations, you have to buy a whole new deck to replace everything. You can't just buy an attacker deck. So that's why I sleeve my cards. Also, they shuffle so much easier. Anyone who's played Magic the Gathering knows that. So, sleeves are tarot card sleeves. I was able to get these at my local game store. Actually, 2 game stores I went into, both of them had them. So these are more common than they seem. I believe the brand that this was Orange. I think I remember saying Orange on the packaging, but tarot card sleeves. Now, unfortunately, and the reason I did have to go to multiple shops was finding a deck box for them. I had to purchase this one on Amazon. And unfortunately, this one is a little too small for the entire deck. However, for the tournaments I've gone to, the 5 missions, the deployments, the mission cards, that stuff, if going to a tournament, it's easiest just to take those individual cards out, put them in here with the attacker and defender deck, and go about your way. So this still isn't bad for tournaments. It holds everything you need, but it's not going to hold your entire deck. So you might want to try and look for a bigger one. I got Bolt Quan Q is the box I got. It was a little too small. I'll try and look up and at some point put in the comments section what it labels it as. So, good sleeve density. All right, enough onto that. Grey Knights. So, first things I want to say is by no means am I an expert on Grey Knights. Again, just throwing out how I look at this army and how I see these things kind of work. All right, here we go. So when I first look at building the army, I look at the missions that we're going to be playing. And typically, Dawn of War is part of them. Come back to why that matters in a second. So the other 4 missions, all of which, every mission, first of all, has one objective in your deployment zone. So that's something you're always going to have. But you don't have the second one in anyone's. 9th edition, we had a couple of missions that would have 2 in your deployment zone and some that only had 1. This way, they've set it up for 1. Okay, so how do you get your second objective? For me personally, I like playing out of a hammer and anvil. The reason being is that the 3 of the missions that play on an angle or table quarters, there is a definitive 1 objective marker that's closer to you. And in all of those situations, you're turning the game into a hammer and anvil deployment, long ways. So, I'm sorry, you're making the longer travel across. So, because of that, planning to play in Hammer and Anvil gives me 4 missions that I can tech into for deployment and my game plan for getting that second objective marker and holding that second one. Because in some missions, you don't really need to get away from just 2 objective markers. And in secondaries, There's missions, there's easy ones that require you to hold your home field and take the one outside. Excuse me that I don't have the name memorized of that one 100%. But you know that every time you see it, you're like, oh, that's an easy 5 points when you draw that. So that's the first play I try to make. Now, Dawn of War in that. In Dawn of War, I still try and turn the game into a hammer and anvil. Yes, it's a longer drive, but that's one of the reasons I like Grey Knights, because Grey Knights can close that gap quickly. Some people ask why I keep the interceptors off board and not put them in the Land Raider for things like behind enemy lines and stuff like that. I'll get to that in a second. But as far as in the deployment choice, again, why not put them on the table if I'm trying to wheel so quickly in that area? Because there is still a lot your opponent can drop and counter and hit that objective marker and start making you have to fight over it. And when you have to fight over the easiest objective marker for you to get, and by ease I mean closest distance, and you're losing it and you're not holding it and the game gets stuck over in that corner, that's when it gets rough to get out of it. So that's where I don't, in those situations, I don't want to risk having to battle over that objective. So something big needs to get in there, something big and beefy, like Nemesis Dread Knight. Now, also with that being said, it's easy to position the Land Raider and the Dread Knight so that they are able to put their weapons onto that second objective in some way, shape, or form. Even hidden behind a rune, they can still threaten the lane that you're coming down. And if you go second, meaning that your opponent is able to hit the objective before you, you're able to pick units up off the table, like the Terminators that I have on there, or the Dread Knight even, and put them back down right on it. Also, at that same time, Calidus Assassin. Calidus Assassin has Infiltrate. So Calidus Assassin can already be deployed outside of the deployment zone within just its minimal movement. The literally minimal, or I'm sorry, the maximum movement to get to the minimum distance, I think that would be right, that it can be from the objective marker. So as far away as you can. She's lone operative. So your opponent's got to get within 12 inches to shoot at her alone. Anything that's looking to move that fast across the table and then charge you, most of the things in the game, especially on turn 1. Turn 2, a little different because your opponent, much like Grey Knights, there are options to pick units up at the end of your opponent's turn. But if you go second, your opponent moves in, they're less likely to have a 9-inch or something really right in your face on that first hit to take the Calidus out. Yes, I lost the Calidus with the World Eaters, but again, in order to take her out, my opponent had to dedicate past the terrain. And most of the time, able to then gun that down or use that to leapfrog to bring something like the Dread Knight into that objective marker. So, Dawn of War. Dawn of War doesn't allow you to do that. So how do you play into Dawn of War with that? Well, now it turns into a hammer and anvil with a corner. Like I said, we're still playing into a hammer and anvil. But because the deployment zone is only 10 inches in, that means that the distance you're going is much further than any of the other deployments to try and get to the other side, but not the other objective. So realistically, the Dawn of War setup kind of turns into a game of, do you want to just play on this side of the map? And it's up to my opponent, because you have to pick which direction you want to go with the terrain, and that's it. So your opponent gets to deploy as well. Gives us a rough matchup into Eldar because D cannons are a thing. So that is going to be a tough matchup no matter what. The only saving grace, and one of the reasons I like Grey Knights, is even in that situation, we can still pick up a chunk of the army and go to the other side of the field and try playing the game from there. And realistically, we just need to hold a corner of the map. Now, there is a mission that duplicates the middle objective, and there is a mission rule that forces you to deploy player-placed objectives. So some of this stuff gets messed up. Well, here's the thing with player-placed objectives. Player-placed objectives with a Dawn of War setup means that you can guarantee that both objectives on your deployment zone are able to be accessible from inside of a room. And realistically, that's how your opponent's going to deploy as well. Because the transgression goes, if you deploy first, or the objective marker specifically, if you deploy the objective marker first, then you don't want to give your opponent the choice to be able to put an objective marker in all of them in no man's land. They got to put one in a deployment zone. And if you put one right in the middle, your opponent's going to put the other one right in the middle, most likely. And now you're playing a risky game. And when I say right in the middle, I mean right in the middle of your deployment zones. Then you're playing a risky game of what if you get that one that's right out in the open, you have to deploy here, and your opponent can just draw firing lanes and take you out because they win the roll-off and they pick the other side. So you put yours in runes. Your opponent looks at you and says, well, I don't want to not have one in a rune if I lose this roll-off, so I'm putting this one in a rune. Your play back, you place the second one outside of anyone's deployment zone, just right on the edge, bleeding into the inside of a rune. So now both can be picked up from a rune. Your opponent is going to have no choice but to do the second thing. Then at that point in the game, at this point in dropping these things back and forth, you have the third objective marker, and you or your opponent is then limited to where this is placed. It goes in the slightly off to the center left, slightly off to the center right. That's realistically about it. Now, you can get crafty and throw that center objective down. Maybe your army can suit it better in outside of Grey Knights and stuff like that. But for Grey Knights, I want to be getting off the table, moving my units, and just really making my opponent have to work to even see me. Move this army like a ghost through most of the game and just pick up and vanish, and just doing work from the shadows. Love it. Love it. All right. So that's the way I look at with deployments. Also included a little bit of the second mission, the missions that kind of manipulate this a bit. And that's how I've been seeing the game. After I played the game with my buddy Josh and saw how secondaries work, I was able to dive in and look at the missions, the mission rules, and then seen a couple tournaments and what TOs were testing and using for the missions. And they were scattered all over mission and objectives, but there was a lot of consistency around like 7 of them. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any tournaments run my favorite mission, which is like the football mission where the objective markers move in the middle. I don't care what anyone says. I love that mission. I know there's people that say, okay, if you want to do that, go play Blood Bowl. And you know what? I've considered it. But I love that mission. And I really think there's a lot of chance, hopefully on the channel, maybe we'll start up a little mini football league where I'll have people bring 500 points and just play some tournament like that. That might be something we do with this mission. But man, I love that mission. It's cool. It's cool. Anyone who's ever played Halo online and played Griff Ball will know it's just silly fun. Silly fun. Okay. So secondaries and a little bit of CP management. So going back to the interceptors not in the Land Raider, some of the secondary missions that I was asked about, such as engage on all fronts, behind enemy lines, and stuff that having the interceptors on table, I could move into a position to score these points on the first turn. And you're right, I could. However, 2 things. 1, the interceptors are dead then. They're completely dead because number 1, I'm not giving my opponent a lot of targets. So there's going to be guns that can shoot at nothing, and there's going to be soldiers that can fight nothing. And my interceptors are not only going to die, but they're probably going to allow my opponent to move into a more advantageous situation. He can position it where he punks 3 interceptors, leaves 2 left, charges them with something that's halfway decent in combat, kills them, and potentially is able to then pile onto an objective marker, really hurting me and really giving my opponent some easy progression across the map. So what happens with an army that's geared to scoring secondaries that draws one of these on turn 1 from going first when I can't really score those? I don't have the resources to get out there for things. So number 1, we need command points to run this thing. And I'm not afraid to hold. Typically, I like to have one card to discard in my first turn to be able to generate some command points. Now, this also matters with going first and going second, because I know there's some other cool stratagems in Grey Knights, but realistically, I focus on just about 3 stratagems I want to be ready for. 1, Mistademos. Mistademos is probably Mistademos and True Silver Armor are the 2 most important ones for me out of Grey Knights. So I want to make sure that I have a command point to be able to True Silver Armor my Land Raider or my Dread Knight to keep them just unkillable. Usually, most of my opponents I face have enough weapons to kill one of them. And then when it goes to the secondary weapons, I do not want them putting any damage on my Dread Knight or my Land Raider. For argument's sake, you got my Land Raider. You scored that. You killed that many points in my my gunship. I need my Dread Knight to live. And I need him to be untouched. I needed it to take all of you to take him out. And with his wounds, his toughness, his save, the way cover works now, it is tough to take out a Land Raider. And if I don't think you have the guns to do it, I can spend the command point on him and buff it up there. Now, what happens when I get vexed on that and someone targets me with an ability that makes that cost another command point for the rest of the game? I need a CP to keep that going. That's not even a question there. Mistademos I can make it around without. Mistademos I need in the early points of the game mostly. Also, when you go after either, now I know some people have 2. You go after both of these, well, you're going to slow me down. Yes. But I feel like that matchup is very, very rare. And I don't see it as often. Going into an army that can vex or make a stratagem cost more twice in a game. So, Mistademos is in True Silver Armor. If True Silver Armor gets vexed, I can go into a defensive Mistademos kind of play where I can stay away from people and try to force them to get into 9 inches of me to get them out of the table, to get them away. That's not always perfect, which is why it's nice to have True Silver Armor on backup. But after the Land Raider and the Dread Knight die, everything else I'm going to be basing on the cover save for the +1. I'm hoping by that time I'm either eliminated some of your bigger guns or I'm able to hide from them. Again, one of the things I mentioned last video is I try to excel at infantry removal. Purifiers removing infantry very quickly, specifically. Bolters and everything else. So as long as I can keep you from traveling through the runes, I'm able to hide with infantry behind walls and continue to have cover to keep on the 2-up save. So if True Silver Armor goes down and I can't use it as much, that's fine. I have a 1 command point Mistademos. If Mistademos goes down, then I'm more or less that takes away the extra command point that I'll have running through things to do Overwatch or other command point things such as that. Now, with going into more of this tactical objectives and stuff, I'm not really worried about doing damage, so I'm not really worried about a CP reroll here or there if I need them. So that I usually don't spend the point on the command point reroll. It happens a few times, but not so much. So on turn 1, if you go first, you generate 1 command point, and now you move your army. You don't need to do True Silver Armor. You're not really in an aggressive position to be jumping around the field and spending all this points on damage and stuff like that. For me, I just shoot the Land Raider at something, hope for the best. Keep the Land Raider in defensive position, keep the Dread Knight in a defensive position so they don't get hurt, move the Calidus Assassin up on the objective marker. Then my opponent goes. Now you have 2 command points. So now if my opponent shoots at me, that's where I can pop True Silver Armor. Chances are my opponent's not going to move close enough for me to trigger Mistademos, so I'm going to go into turn 2 with a command point. Now, if in that succession, and what I usually like, or not usually like, there's 2 options. If I draw a card during the first turn that I don't like and don't think I can score, or may just be the wrong time, cool, I pitch it for a command point. So now everything I just said, +1 command point. That +1 command point lets me do the Overwatch, lets me spend the extra command point on the Vexed, Mista Deimos, or True Silver armor, lets me do those things. Now, yes, there's strat that lets me not be targetable within outside 12, giving me like lone operative rule. That's cool and all. I prefer hiding behind a wall where you can't see me at all and can't shoot at me unless you're artillery. Another reason for the Land Raider, protects well against turn 1 artillery. So we go into the opposite direction. You go second. So now if you go first, your opponent goes first. They move, they do stuff, they maybe shoot some artillery. You're really dialed in, you're really tucked in back into a building. Not really a lot to do. Your opponent just kind of moves, you burn turn 1. Nice. Goes into your turn. You then can pick up to 3 units, one of which being the Calidus Assassin to be number 4. So Calidus, Terminators, Dread Knight all can get picked up. Now, the Strike that are with the Tech Marine could get picked up off the table. When I pick those units up and then I go into the next turn and I draw, now on this turn, I could go after the behind enemy lines. I could go after the engage on all fronts. And with those two, I'm more susceptible to try and go after engage on all fronts because that one I can still do defensively because my opponent hasn't spread out entirely. And with the Tech Marine that's going into my list with Sigil of Exigence, as long as I get there and I'm in a position that you can't charge me, if you shoot at me, I get the squad out of there. I get in, get my points, and get out, which is a theme with a lot of the stuff. So now in that scenario, I'm going to be looking for the card on turns 2 and 3 that I don't like and don't want to try and score. And that's going to be the one I pitch for the command point to have that extra command point to defend against a Vex stratagem that is crucial because Mista Deimos and True Silver are my primary 2 strats that I need to run back and forth. When you move within 9, and when I have 1 model left and you move within 9 of it and I can pick it up off the table, you may need to because that one model unit can easily drop in and take that objective. Yes, again, that's another reason for that 1 extra CP. That might be where you have to auto pass a leadership check on a 1 model unit to make sure they don't battle shock. That's true. If that 1 model is a Strike Marine and it can cycle through a command phase, bam, you can control that even if it battle shocks because you control it until someone else takes it. Huge. Love it. So going into the rest of the secondaries, a lot of them, the only one that I have a difficult time scoring and usually will end up being a pitch for a command point is is one where you have to go into your opponent's deployment zone and take their home field objective. That's one I can never even touch. It's just impossible for me to get through. So that one's kind of a bummer. But considering the fact that we're talking 1 card out of the entire deck that is difficult to score, those numbers are significantly better. And at that time, reading the board state. If you feel like you're in a very strong defensive position and your opponent isn't going to either move in to trigger the Mista Deimos, maybe your opponent doesn't have a Vex. That's more of an Imperium thing right now, as far as I've seen. Xenos don't. So into a Xenos army, you can spend the command point to shuffle that out and get yourself a new card. But for all the rest of them, though, with Grey Knights, man, we got the speed to cover it. And with the MSU or multiple spall unit builds, it's very, very easy to get onto those objectives. So I'm going to talk, to finish this off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw 2 cards. I'm risking this all for the entire video. I'm going to draw 2 cards. I'm going to talk about real fast how I would try and score these if these were the first 2 cards I drew on turn 1 going second. So we got Assassination and Secure No Man's Land. So like I said, I'm looking for that card to discard to gain a command point. Assassination, really, there's no good opportunity to draw this thing. This is one that you draw and go, oh, okay, well, I finished off the squad and there's a character there, so yeah, sure, I'll kill the character. Timing on this card is terrible. So here's my command point. Secure No Man's Land. At the end of your turn, you control 2 or more objective markers in No Man's Land. This secondary is worth 5 points. So, and it's at the end of your turn. If you control 2 or more objective markers in No Man's Land. So you can, or the second one, excuse me, if at the end of your turn you only control one objective marker in no man's land, secondary mission is still achieved, but you store 2 victory points instead of 5. So you score 5 points if you control 2 markers in no man's land, and you're going second. That's really, really easy to do. First of all, we're able to pick up the Strike, the Terminators, and the Calidus. Now, assuming that there is space and the Calidus was still able to hit that objective marker, there's nothing to say that you don't just put it right back down on that objective marker that's outside your deployment zone. For the rest of it, you just need to find an objective marker that's in a safe area. Everything except for Dawn of War makes this easy because at the same time, you still want to get aggressive on position. And with the Strike Marines, we're able to put them in a position where our opponent could shoot at them, but cannot charge them. Once your opponent shoots at them, then they just vanish from the table. All they need to do is be there for a second. So at that same time, if your opponent does try to get into a position where they charge them and they come within 9 inches, you spend the command point and you pick them up off the table. Yes, your opponent could stay outside of 9 inches and risk that long charge. Sometimes that's the dice. Sometimes if your opponent wants to bait that entire hit on that 9-inch charge, that's what they're going for. I mean, I've seen it happen. I've seen it not. We've all seen it. Sometimes you just got to try and make that charge because, yeah, they hit you, they hold you onto the table. But that's the easiest way to score that. And not everyone is even going to have the ability to get a unit up within range to make a 9-inch charge that can charge a squad like Strike Marines and wipe them out. Strike Marines hit back pretty hard, and you got a Tech Marine in there with a surprisingly good profile. So you can pick those things up and get out of combat. If your opponent tries to charge you with something that is, let's just say, bulky and like a tank, and just hold you there so you can't bounce off the field, okay, you still control the objective going into your next turn, and you make it sticky. And honestly, over time, you're probably going to beat up that lower grade transport in a sense. So, and then at the end of the turn, I pitch Assassinate from my command point to move up in my command point margin, knowing very well that I actually just pushed one out of the game that I don't really have to worry about. Bring It Down isn't as bad because vehicle's a lot easier to manage. All that's and that's a lot easier to manage that. Assassination and characters, I mean, come on, the characters that you're going to be able to shoot at turn 1 are going to have 16 wounds and eat dice saves for breakfast. So they're not going anywhere. Games Workshop has clearly said they don't want us killing those things on turn 1, especially Grey Knights. So, well, that's going to be where I end that for this video. Hopefully gave some information out there. Look forward to hearing your guys' comments down below on what you guys thought. Maybe something you've seen on the table, or maybe there was some way that I started down a path or a train of thought with something. You're like, okay, I like that, but what about this? What about this part of it? Adding to it. Tomorrow I will be working on, and I'm going to try and get out early, my video with my Grey Knights that I'm going to be taking on Lane's Custodes. We got the Battle of Silver and Gold. That's going to be going on this week. And and then just more and more content. If you guys like these videos, I'm going to keep doing them. Hopefully this was, again, not too crazy of a length. And if this is the point where you want to cut off the video, I will talk to you again soon. But for everyone else who stuck around, I did say that I wanted to talk a little bit about just how awesome it was finally clearing 1,000, thank yous and all that stuff. But I wanted to talk about Grey Knights first and get that video out for everybody. So again, thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. It's been pretty fun, pretty awesome. I'm definitely a talker. Anyone who knows me knows I can talk and not shut up. And as I've been doing these videos, I've gotten more and more comfortable with just talking about Warhammer. And man, I love talking about Warhammer. When I get some of these late nights where I just have the crazy mad scientist thoughts about Warhammer, it's great to have an outlet to talk to and be part of this community. This is a fun, awesome game. I've loved playing this game for many, many years. And in some ways, it's been the only hobby at all. I play video games, but for a little bit, I kind of had to not play video games and pick only one hobby because, I wanted to live the adult life. wife, kids, all those things, it required a little bit of time. Warhammer has always stuck with me, and I love being able to just be passionate about this hobby with a lot of other people that are passionate about this hobby and just love this general game. It's really cool. I feel like growing up, the way I always played with toys is very similar to Warhammer. Like in my head, I had overcomplicated rules for how this action figure would move to this action figure and what this one could do. And they were just rules in my head and didn't mean anything. But now it's Warhammer, which sometimes, I mean, it feels like Games Workshop just has the rules in their head. And I don't know what's going on there, but still, it's a great game they brought us. They're human. They make mistakes. Okay. They're a big business. There's a lot of hands in the cookie pot. Okay. I don't care. I love the game. And I won't talk bad about Games Workshop. They're people too. It's That's my feeling. And I love this game. So you guys do you, and we'll keep tearing it apart and finding broken. And when I say tear it apart, I mean finding broken combos and disgusting stuff. Here's looking at you, Eldar. So, speaking of which, congratulations to my buddy Zach. Zach recently went 5-0 with Eldar at a GT in Akron. Yes, he's playing Eldar. They're top of the meta right now. Sure, he's still putting in the hours to practice that list. He put in the hours practicing that list, fine-tuning it, making sure he got it right, making sure he knew how to run everything. Congratulations, dude. Awesome job out there. Proud of you, man. And look forward to having you on the channel again soon. 1,000 subscribers on my birthday. Guys, thank you so much. It has been awesome. I look forward to continuing to do this, starting to develop more quality on the content as well, especially since we hit this milestone. There's a lot of things that I'm talking to people and trying to learn and work on, getting better thumbnails as well, maybe upgrading into more cameras and stuff like that. It's all stuff that's just going to take time. Don't have any sponsors. I'm just a hobbyist doing this myself. So it takes time to build up some of the equipment and get some of the stuff in here. But I'm dedicated to it. And you guys have made this a awesome, awesome, awesome experience. I look forward to so much more in the future. Again, thank you guys so much. Awesome birthday present, 1,000 subscribers. And I think we kicked over to 1,001 right before I was getting ready to record this video. So again, I don't know. I don't even know what else I could say. I'm absolutely amazed. Like sitting at home talking about making a YouTube channel and being a content creator, doing this stuff, and then hitting that milestone of 1,000 and going, wow, maybe I could do this. Maybe I can keep pushing this and bringing better content and keep increasing everything that we do here on the channel, because there's not a day goes by that I don't love doing this all the time. So thank you all for making this possible. And I look forward to talking to you guys again soon. Thanks for watching.